Stieg Larsson's own notes, and you can see this one, for instance, is from a court case where the Contra newspaper actually sued someone for writing about them in a bad way. And Stieg Larsson followed the whole court proceedings and was making notes like this. And you see that he was very conscientious in how he followed this. And you find these small drawings, sketches, since he was a graphic artist. You can see, you can find it quite often. He was actually drawing the people that he was watching. And sometimes the handwriting was like this, very quick, or it could be like this, very neat and very small and actually neat, like in this way. Here you have some other sketches also. Olof Palme and his wife went out from their home around 7:30 in the evening, and they were going to a cinema that started a little bit later. They were crossing the town using the underground, and they came to the cinema. The cinema started at 9 o'clock, and when they walked in there, someone may have watched them, but 2 hours later, the film was over. Everybody walked out. Olof Palme and his wife said goodbye to their son and his fiancée, who was also in the cinema, and started walking along Sveavägen, one of the longest streets in Stockholm. They crossed the street after a couple of 100 meters, walked another 100 meters or two, until they reached the corner of Sveavägen and Tunnelgatan. And a man stepped up from behind and shot Olof Palme, the Prime Minister, with one shot, and fired a second shot that just touched the back of the Prime Minister's wife, but she survived and was not injured, but the Prime Minister was dead instantly. The whole country was shaken, and this is a defining moment of Swedish history. Another one, similar one, was a few hundred years earlier when our king was killed in an opera, in the opera house. But this was the second defining moment. Before that, we were a naive country, believing that nothing will ever happen to anyone in Sweden, and suddenly the Prime Minister is shot and the murder is gone, and the murder is still unsolved. I'm convinced that I know who murdered him. I don't go out with a name because it's a very serious accusation, but I actually consider the book a manual to solve the killing, which is also what I wrote to the police when they asked for the book before it was published. Well, I was going to write a different book. I wasn't even very interested in Stieg Larsson, and I wasn't very interested in the Palme murder. I was going to write about something else, about places where there have been double murders. And I found a very, very famous place in Sweden where 3 people were beaten to death by the son in the house. And 50 years later, the biggest hater of Olof Palme moved into that same apartment. And I thought it was fascinating with this story of a double homicide. And so I started looking at this second person who moved into the apartment, and in another archive I found a paper. It was not signed, it had no date, but it was saying that this hater was a suspect in the murder of Olof Palme. And I asked the lady who had the archive who wrote this, and she said Stieg Larsson. And that was a defining moment in my life. Suddenly everything turned around, and I was started to looking for Stieg Larsson's papers. And a half year later, I found 20 moving boxes that were forgotten, full of papers by Stieg Larsson with all his research into the murder of Olof Palme.